This is Sports Nerds. Hot Spat. Oh man, I gotta wake up. This is Sports Nerds, a podcast delivering in-depth critical perspectives, offering irreverent jokes, and making sports not fun for you and anybody you love. We're your hosts, Dr. Samuel J. and
hi, Dr. Brian Trader.
You can find us and rate us on iTunes and Stitcher by searching Sports Nerds. You can follow us on Facebook at Sports Nerds and on YouTube. At the moment, our YouTube page is not easy to find because we do not have enough subscribers, and Google has made sure that they have actual decent YouTube channels, and so please do find us on YouTube through our Facebook page. We'll post that link up there. And once you get to that, be sure and subscribe us. We need subscribe to us. We need a certain number of subscribers in order to basically create a URL that will just say youtube.com/channels/sportsnerds. So please help us out with that. While you're at it, you can also email us at wearesportsnerds@gmail.com. We haven't received any feedback to that particular email address, but we have received quite a few comments on our Facebook page. So once again, you can find us on Facebook by just looking for @sportsnerds. You can hunt us down. We're also on Twitter @_sportsnerds. So @_sportsnerds. Today, Brian and I do have I think an interesting show, pretty decent rundown. We're going to open up with a discussion about U.S. women's hockey and their holdout and then the subsequent contract agreement that was signed late last week. We're going to get into the Raiders' move to Las Vegas. Hopefully not spend too much time on that because we've done that in the past. And then we'll finish up by talking about the NCAA's role in North Carolina's repeal of their bathroom bill, which quite interestingly, I just read an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, little commentary talking about how the NCAA is actually not totally on board with moving stuff back to North Carolina because, as Brian and I will discuss, the repeal isn't as badass as North Carolina would like you to think. So that's the rundown for today. We do have a quick update on our on our Sports Nerds pool, right, for March Madness. It looks like, Brian, you could be perhaps getting some money into the Schrader household. If North
that
Carolina
assumes
wins.
Jill shares with me.
Oh, yeah. Good
I
point.
sort of joked with her yesterday that it just has to go in the fantasy gambling account, and she said not a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Not a chance. No, she's not. She's not down for that.
Yeah.
So it looks like here's how it'll work, folks. In case you care, if North Carolina wins, 1, 2, 3 will be Jill Schrader, so Brian's wife, Kevin Cummings, who is another friend of Brian's, and then Derek Yoder, who's a college buddy of mine. If Gonzaga wins, it will go Adam Schwartzendruber, college buddy of mine, Jason Kinney, which is one of Brian's buddies, and then Jarrett Ellis, which was Brian's buddy to begin with, and now a friend of mine. So we did have
hands.
Yes, exactly. Changed hands, and he's now my go-to law advice giver. So, because I feel like I'm in trouble with the law quite a bit. But anyhow, we'll save that for another podcast. So, Brian, are you ready to run this down, buddy?
Well, I think we got to start off actually with the Cubs.
Why?
Did they win last night? I can't remember.
No, they lost.
Oh, do you think is that a bad omen?
I think they're going to go 0-162.
Yeah, based on last night, they're on pace to win 0 games.
Yeah.
I mean, and against St. Louis too. That's got to hurt a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna lie. I did not watch one pitch of that game.
Oh, I watched some of it.
Yeah, and I just wasn't. I'm ready for baseball to be back, but today, I mean, I was, as a baseball fan, I was more excited about today just because there's going to be an entire slew of games. But last night, I wanted to watch Homeland.
You wanted to watch Homeland?
I really did. This season of Homeland has just got me like super invested. It may be the best season of Homeland ever. So,
wow.
Yeah. Have you ever
I'm
watched
going to watch
it?
the Red Sox play it too, regardless of whether or not Homeland is on.
I know. Well, I've got 161
I guess that's
other
just
games
how you were raised.
watch. Yeah. I just wasn't there, you know? Wasn't there. Wasn't ready. Wasn't ready.
By the way, we did an entire podcast about fair weather fans. Like you win a World Series for the first time in a billion
Yeah.
years, and then you can't even take time to watch their first game. Is it weird that they open on the road after winning the World Series? I don't know
Well, that
how
schedule
abnormal
was
that is.
probably set. No,
You
I'm
think it was
guessing
set
that
beforehand?
schedule was set. Yeah, long before. I mean,
You think you
baseball.
let them open at home?
You got to
My
coordinate a
other
lot
thinking,
of.
my other thinking was maybe they open them on the road so they'll be home during the weekend.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Maybe that's the point. I mean, I don't know how much pull the Rockies have with with that, right? But I mean, Rockies fans, this is like not even Rockies fans, Denverites.
They
This is the
love them.
biggest one. Oh my God, it was like one of the biggest days of the year. Maybe the biggest day in terms of celebration and just drunkenness. So that'll be happening this weekend. I hope the weather's awful for the
Just kills it.
Rockies. Sorry. It really turns me off that they are such fair weather fans, even though you're pointing out that I am too. I swear it had nothing to do with being a fair weather fan.
It had
Um,
all to do with homeland.
yeah, yeah. I was just, yeah. I was home spending some quality time with the fam, and I don't know. I had watched I watched a lot of I watched both games on Saturday night, so maybe that was it. It maybe filled my sports um, my sports container,
Yeah, your
right?
container was overfloweth with
Was
sports.
overflowing, yeah, because
Those
um,
games were great though.
yeah. Well, and
This tournament's been so good.
so good, so good, and I think knowing that I tonight, like I'm gonna be glued. Both of us are, Catherine and I, because for the first time in a long time, we actually have a chance of winning some money with this thing because I'm winning her work pool and she's in second. So if
Oh,
Gonzaga
nice.
wins, yeah, if Gonzaga wins, I think. Well, I guess you guys are pulling for UNC though in the Schrader house. So
Oh yeah, we're true.
perhaps one of us will be happy tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
One of us will have more money. But
sure. But I
anyhow,
mean,
pal.
that's why it's fun. If we lose, I lose $10. Whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly,
It is
exactly.
not
There was
guaranteed
been,
type of money.
it's been a great tournament. You hit that on the head, man. Even those weekend games were awesome.
I mean,
I couldn't
Oregon,
believe that
either
they
Oregon
couldn't box
or South
out.
Carolina. Well, South Carolina kind of lost that game, but I don't know. It was great. It was good. Oh man, should we say
Yeah, I
one other
think
thing before we get into the actual rundown? UConn
yeah,
lost.
for sure. Yeah, I know. I didn't. Did you realize that like when it happened?
I saw it on my phone. I didn't watch the game.
Okay. See, I didn't even see it on my phone, and I didn't
Well, actually, I
realize
guess
that they
that's not
lost
true.
until last night.
A guy I was
When
hanging out with saw it on his phone, but I give him full
okay.
credit. Credit where credit's due.
Wow. Who beat them?
Mississippi State.
Mississippi State. And you have ties to Mississippi State.
Yeah, my cousins down in Vicksburg. I don't know
Okay.
if they listen to the podcast.
Well, shout
Vicksburg
out to
Cougars.
Vicksburg, Mississippi, and then South Carolina won. South Carolina's kind of been a relatively strong women's basketball program for the last, I want to say, decade. They're
Well,
always
and
at top
the men's
two, three.
program.
Oh yeah, not the men's program. So it was a good weekend for college basketball, and now it's over. Now baseball's back. Are you excited for the Masters? Do you
Oh
care?
gosh, yeah, totally.
You do. Will
With
you
golf, I
watch?
am a fair weather fan. I watch the Masters and the U.S. Open. Don't really care about the Open Championship. Don't really care about the PGA.
Okay. Why do you
Masters,
watch the U.S. Open?
U.S. Open is usually a hard course, right? Like
Hmm.
Masters is they've been playing the same course for a billion years, and they can all go there and shoot 50 under or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I remember some good U.S. Opens, like when Tiger was still young and won that Pebble Beach one, where I think he
Yes.
won with like 2 under or something like that. They play hard courses,
Yeah.
usually beautiful courses. I mean, I like the Masters, but I like them going out to a new course and making it longer, making it harder. That didn't sound right.
No. Hey, there's our cut right there. Cut.
Sorry,
There's our
sure.
cold open. No, I know what you're saying, right? We'll have to save that maybe for a summer episode, but that is definitely part of the draw for the U.S. Open is that those guys start playing like the rest of us. But
Well, yeah, and that's also you get it last year during the Open. You were watching. There was some U.S. amateur kid who was in the top 10 going into day 3 or something like that.
hmm
So I mean,
Yeah.
you get weird names kind of popping up, and it is sort of open. Yeah, I like both of those. By the time you get to the British and to the PGA, I'm sort of over it. But I mean, I'll watch them, but I won't make a point of sitting down and watching them.
Yeah, they're good for Saturday, Sunday viewing.
Yeah,
Maybe
totally, absolutely.
The British especially because it's on like at 7 o'clock our time, so it's not even afternoon viewing. You can get up and watch it. But no,
Watching this
I
just
feel
don't
you.
even seem like fun. It's like all windy. I
Oh,
don't
it's
know. Those link
brutal.
style
I'd
courses
rather
are
play
just
in rain.
hard. Yeah,
Hmm. I'd
something.
rather play in rain than some of that wind. But hey, we'll have to hold on to some of these
Yeah,
conversations
for
for the
sure.
summer. But I want to get your take because we have talked a little bit about this on the just U.S. It doesn't have to. The reason why we're going to start this conversation here is because the U.S. women's hockey team struck a deal a couple days ago with USA Hockey that basically kind of gave them new contract, higher pay, and allowed their holdout to end. They were kind of in a they were there was a holdout. They weren't going to play in the International Ice Hockey Federation World Championships, which
In Michigan, by the way,
in Michigan,
in Plymouth,
right?
down the road.
Um, and they were they were going to refuse to play until um, they made more, right? Now, what's interesting about this, I guess, is that the men, the U.S. men's team, joined up with the women's team, and they were going to hold out as well. But all of this kind of ended up being a wash because the women's hockey team did sign a new contract, right? They will be making more money, but the issue does arise. It seems like every 2 years with women's soccer and their kind of pay versus the men's team. Now we have it with women's hockey and their pay versus the men's team. So I guess it's a good topic to kind of discuss now. We can get into gender inequality. I'm interested in talking about what makes a social movement successful, and did is this only possible because the men joined in solidarity? So I just wanted to get your take on this, Brian, and how you processed what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't think I really knew how little they were getting paid. I mean, some people said you can't. It's basically expecting people to treat playing on the women's national team as a part time job because that's kind of what they got paid. They got paid. It was kind of complicated. They got $1,000 a month during 6 months of the year when they were training, and then a little bit more or less based on experience during other parts. Now with this new deal, they're all going to make like $70,000 as a base salary, which is it's a full time job if you're going to be a professional athlete, which is basically what they are. Not basically, that's what they are. Uh, I guess we could debate whether or not they're technically amateurs. I mean, if they're getting paid, they're not, right? That's what they are. Then they need to be able to get paid so you can focus your efforts on doing that. And I mean that combined with the fact that like the women's soccer team, they're really really good. I mean they win a lot. So with that being said, I think they deserve that money. You and I kind of chatted about the economics of it beforehand. Like I don't know enough to say, were they not getting paid this much because they didn't bring in all that much money? Just for fun, when you sent me this article and I saw that this thing was going on in Plymouth, first of all, I was embarrassed that I didn't know about it. Right? Like, what? Why is this not something that's on local TV here, where they're like, come down to Plymouth and watch this hockey championship? Started on Friday. It's like over today, I think, or tomorrow. So it didn't take very long.
Yeah, it is. It's short.
Most of these
I
games
think it's over
are
now.
they're not even. No, I think tonight and tomorrow are like the medal games. It might be tonight. It was
Okay.
a really short
Okay.
pool play, and then basically there was a semifinal, and then the medal rounds. It was like two groups of four. Um,
Okay.
but you know what I mean? Like advertise, like do some advertise. If you're not having if you're not making a bunch of money and that makes it hard to pay your athletes, do some advertising, get people out to see this thing. So I pulled it up and looked for tickets, and I would have driven down there. It's half an hour from me, and they just didn't cost anything, and they're playing in a really tiny arena. It surprises me. It seems to me that you could build this as a thing, make it something more that people want to go out and see, and then the more you generate interest and invest in marketing and PR for the event and get people excited about it and wanting to come out, the more money you'll have to spend.
So what you're saying is that, right? You could the argument can be made that women don't make as much as men because they don't generate the revenue that men do.
Yeah,
However,
I don't
but
know if they
USA
do.
Hockey
No.
has done nothing. But USA Hockey has done nothing to kind of allow women's hockey to potentially generate more revenue. Right?
Yeah.
They're not advertising this championship. They're not doing anything to maybe sell merchandise. In more significant ways, and so they're almost creating their own problem. They're almost creating this continuation of inequality, or they're at least allowing it to happen, not necessarily creating it, but they're not doing anything to change it. Which that's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that if the men's world championships was being held in the United States, we would know about it, right? The other thing I was
Mm-hmm.
going to say was it's not even being broadcast live on TV for all the games. Like some of the semifinal games, which I don't know if the U.S. women made it a full play. They were the number one seed, so I assume they did. They're televised on the NFL Network on delay. You know what I mean? Like they're just not doing anything to make this a big deal. Seriously, I looked at the ticket prices. All the games that don't involve the U.S. are $10 a pop. All the games that do involve the U.S. are $25 a pop. So they do understand that people are willing to spend more to go see. Maybe that's just because we're in the United States to go see the American women play um,
Mm-hmm.
in this pretty small arena. I think it's where USA Hockey might actually be based out of, though. But
Okay.
I just think do some advertising and maybe they're playing in Joe Louis in Detroit in front of 50 60,000 people instead of 3 or 4 thousand people, and then you're making a ton of money, and then we're not having this conversation. I could be wrong. Again, I've not poured over their books. I don't know what they spent on advertising or what they can afford to spend on advertising. Maybe it was well advertised and I just didn't notice it. I'm not going to cast aspersions on things that I'm not super informed about, but it seems to me that's part of the problem, right? That I'm hearing about this hockey event that's going on down the road from me, not because of a big billboard that says come out and watch the women's team. I would have loved to have taken my kids to this, by the way. We go watch OHL minor league hockey up in Flint all the time. We watched them lose in the playoffs a couple days ago. I would have gone and seen this in a second had I known about it. But
Uh,
instead, the reason that I'm hearing about it is because of headlines that say, "Oh, the women are gonna, skip this event so they can get fair pay." I mean, again, good for
mhm.
them. I'm happy they're getting. I'm happy they're getting the new deal. Maybe this will raise the bar for what USA Hockey or whoever needs to do to get people excited about it
It's a
and
really
generate
strong
interest.
deal too. They'll now earn $70,000 a year, and then a potential, excuse me, um, for $100,000 a year should they win an Olympic
Yeah,
gold medal. Which I mean, for any Olympic athlete, that's helpful, right? That's
yeah,
good.
that
I
helps.
mean, there are so few Olympic athletes that make good money. It's really like Michael Phelps, and that's because of endorsement deals. But even, I mean, the track stars, they have to go to Europe in order to make money, just because it's not there, which is kind of ironic because those are the two sports that get so much coverage during the Olympics, but their pay is so
Yeah.
small.
This article
Hey,
that you sent me doesn't say how much the men get paid for their
no, I'm not.
stints
Yes,
on
I'm
the
sure.
national team. But the funny thing to
Mhm.
me is, I suspect it was better than this. But it probably didn't need to be, right? Because the bulk of those players, I'll say, probably 99% of them, maybe 100% of them, are playing pro hockey somewhere,
Yeah, yeah.
making tons of money. It's something they could probably afford to do for free, but you know, aren't.
I was, you know, I come at this story with conflicted kind of emotions because I think it's great that there was a positive outcome and that the pay did increase, and I think in terms of women's equality and gender equality and everything, I think it's fantastic. It's funny because last night we were watching, or yesterday afternoon we were watching Neighbors 2. Have you seen that?
No, I like the
It's
first one though.
like, oh, it's great, but it's like completely, pro woman, pro women. It's like a feminist film, but it's very, very, very funny. And so, we both have daughters. I think a lot of this stuff hits a little closer to home for us. But I wonder, is this does this happen without the support of not just the U.S. men's team,
Mhm.
but I mean, you had players associations from the NHL, from the NBA, from the NFL, from the MLB, who
Yeah.
all went public in support of this. Do you think so? That's my first question. Is this possible without that support? And two, do you think that the systemic issues with gender inequality are more issues that are dictated from the top, as opposed to I guess the day-to-day workings of those who are involved in it? So, I guess are NBA players more progressive than the owners of NBA teams, right? Or are NHL players more progressive than the owners of teams or the administrators who run USA Hockey? So those are my two questions for you, because I'm not sure I have an answer yet. I'm waiting for you to respond.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate that all of those organizations came out in support of the women's hockey team, right? At the same time, it was a very low risk proposition to do so. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yes.
For all the
Yeah.
men in USA Hockey to come out and say, yeah, we think that they should get paid more is one thing. For them to come out and say, we think they should get paid more, take some of our money, is an entirely different calculation, one that they would have been reticent to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I want to, appreciate the sort of um, the gesture on the part of all of these both men's and women's players associations and individuals who came out in support of these people. But again, like it definitely helped. It probably helped them get the deal done. Maybe not so much as literally these women saying we're not going to play anymore. I think they are they were the catalyst to getting this deal done. Right? USA Hockey looks ridiculous if they're hosting the World Championships and their team doesn't even play and they're the number one seed. It calls attention to the systemic pay gap and broader kind of systemic issues of unfair treatment towards female athletes. Um, More so than does the support that they got from other places. Does that make sense? Here's a good example
It
of this, I
does.
think. Right, like the women's team, women's USA women's soccer team was really upset for good reason that they had to play on a bunch of artificial turf fields in the last World Cup,
Hmm.
right? And the one before that, if I'm not incorrect. And they kind of came out and said, I think they were threatening a similar boycott, which didn't end up happening, um, which may have had a pay element involved as well. But there's really good evidence that says that you're more likely to get injured playing soccer on an artificial field than on grass, right? Like your cleats can kind of get stuck up in it, and you could tear a meniscus or hurt your knee or hurt your ankle or whatever. In grass, it's more likely for the turf to just kind of rip away. And they were trying to do something similar here, where they were like, "This is unfair. The men would never have to play on these artificial fields." They actually laid real grass, real turf over the artificial fields, but that's something that the women couldn't get negotiated, right? So all of that was to say this, which is this is good. I mean, this is a good individual victory, but does not represent sort of a massive leap towards equality in sports or socially too, right? There's broader issues with pay gap in other industries or unfair treatment in terms of leave and insurance and all of those different sorts of things, right? So a good victory, but this is definitely a battle, not the war, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it sheds light on obviously inequality, not like you're pointing out, not just within hockey, but in general. And I think what what is often countered, right? The counter argument to what you and I are pointing out is that women's sports just don't generate as much revenue, right? Which means that we shouldn't pay them as much. And I think obviously we have anecdotal evidence here. We have this one example, but it's a big example, and that's the one of U.S. women's soccer, as Brian's pointing out, and kind of the lack of access to the same kind of training facilities. But what makes U.S. women's soccer unique is that they do generate a significant amount more than the men's soccer team. There's an article that Brian and I were both looking at going into recording. PBS put up there, right? Which is, I think, if you look at some of the comments below there, it's just obviously the liberal elite are putting this kind of stuff out there. Fake news, hashtag fake news. But uh, it's projected that this year the U.S. women's soccer team will profit 5.2 million as compared to the men's soccer team, which will profit actually the negative they'll lose $1 million. And so we're pointing out that a lot of this has to do with World Cup timing and qualifiers, et cetera, et cetera. But I do remember vaguely a similar infographic coming out a couple years ago when the men were actually in the midst of a World Cup kind of summer, and it was still the same kind of thing. Women's soccer, USA women's soccer, continually produces more profits than the men's team. However, their pay is not even close to equal. And so I do think that the argument that, oh, they just don't generate as much revenue is just kind of bullshit, because in this particular case, that's obviously not what's going on. That's obviously not what's going on. It would be interesting to look at UConn women's basketball too, knowing that yes, they lost, but they're still this kind of behemoth when it comes to women's sports. I wonder how much revenue their program generates, and how that program is able to perhaps support other programs at the University of Connecticut in the same way that a football program at Alabama or Ohio State supports other athletics programs. Because it feels like a lot of people go to those women's basketball games, and they probably, I mean, it can't be that expensive a ticket to get, because a lot of college basketball games are not, but you would think that they still generate a good amount of revenue. But we'll have to move on from there, because I think we want to get into everything in under about 45 minutes. So, Brian, do you have any final comments on this particular topic you wanted to air?
No, I mean I think it's kind of gotta kind of wait and see, right? This
Yeah.
is and again it's the battle, not the war. You got to kind of see what these trends look like for other sports and for other organizations, and see what the trends look like. So I mean, hopefully it's not one step forward, three steps back, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's gonna, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the comment, the lack of publicity for this weekend's event, and I think this is where TV providers or major media outlets have to kind of get in the game and air this stuff, right? It could have been easily put on ESPN,
Yeah.
8 or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
So
this is a really good point, right? Like, I guess let me have a short detour. This is a debate that I've had with people in my argumentation classes before, right? Which is there's kind of a circle and egg or chicken and an egg thing when it
maybe a
comes
circle and an egg.
a circle and an egg. Uh,
Usually, I'm the one that says stupid shit because I'm not awake.
I
But
got ahead of what I was trying to say. No, there's a chicken
uh,
and an egg thing when it comes to women's sports, right? So for people who are like, whatever, women's sports aren't that interesting, and that's why I don't watch them, and because I don't watch them, their organizations tend to flame out often, right? Like there's been multiple attempts at women's professional soccer leagues in the United States. There was women's professional basketball before the WNBA. Even the WNBA struggles, right? It's not. I mean, it seems like it's got a pretty good foothold over the last decade or so, but it's not the NBA by any stretch of the imagination. And people use that as an external justification to say, like I can prove that women's sports are not as interesting or as fun to watch as men's sports. And if they're not, that's just sort of the market saying, well, whatever, like you have to be able to make it. And that would be maybe the answer that someone would give to this, why aren't we watching this women's hockey event, right?
mhm,
And my sort
mhm.
of response to that is you can't assume neutrality when it comes to the way that these things are presented, right? It's hard for the WNBA to get a lot of traction because it's on in the middle of the summer, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's obviously better for sports to be on in the winter when people are, not outside camping and barbecuing and swimming, but rather are inside because the weather's not very good. Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah,
like
baseball suffers. Yeah, no, no, no. That's a great point.
these sports
That's
are
a
not
great point.
presented in a neutral and fair way,
Right,
right? They are
right.
there is an element of rhetoric involved here in their presentation and how
Uh-huh.
persuasive they seem to people. So let's not assume that like all sports start from an equal starting point, and whether or not they get fan bases or whether or not they get high ratings and people watch them is a neutral metric for whether or not those sports are interesting to watch. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
That
Curling is the
makes
best thing to watch on TV. It's just never on.
that's a really good point. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I'm also thinking the same argument was made. You probably don't. I don't know. You may remember this. The same argument has been made. At least I've heard it in the past. That there's the reason why soccer wasn't on TV. Right? Not necessarily now, because you can access it pretty relatively
Yeah.
easily, especially online. But maybe 15, 20 years ago, the argument was, oh, it's just boring. Right? It's hard to
Yeah.
watch. Well, that's not the case, right? That some stakeholder, somebody with a lot of power, made the decision to not air soccer,
Yes.
because I don't know, they found something else to be relevant. But whereas, I mean, you look at the popularity of soccer across the world, other than, here in this country, and you're starting to see it increase here. And a lot of that has to do with just getting airtime. And so I think to say that a market doesn't, that a sport isn't marketable is kind of just bullshit, because it's usually those stakeholders, those people who make decision, who decide that a sport is not marketable. I mean, there's no reason why the WNBA, as you're pointing out, couldn't be marketable if it was if they had like a doubleheader with the NBA during the winter months when there's literally nothing else on TV. So we're watching a bad game between I don't know who are the worst teams in the NBA now. A bad game between the Pelicans and the Timberwolves. Okay, we're going to watch that because it's on TV. Why wouldn't we watch a decent game between two well-known WNBA teams? So
but the way you framed it is totally correct. They use the excuse is that there's no demand for these things, and the assumption is that everyone had an equal opportunity to generate demand in the first place.
Yes.
That there's not preference for some sports over other sports, and there are.
Would you?
And those are not based on the external or objective assessment of those sports as more interesting. It's because maybe someone had a personal preference or money, or there's lots of different motivations for those things, right? And listen, the internet and cord cutting and streaming, all of these things are really going to democratize and expose a lot of these preference things that's been set up. Like we talked about, you alluded to this on the podcast last week or the week before, cricket, right? Which used to be nearly impossible to watch in the United States. Now you can there's a Willow on most basic cable providers. You can watch Australian League cricket, or you can watch world cricket matches. That sport is fun to watch. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, now that people can kind of see it and it's getting a little bit more play, you see people going and watching it more, right? And your point about soccer is well taken. The assumption was no one in the United States would dig soccer because we're a football country. And you can see, man, younger people love soccer. The atmosphere is just as kind of raucous as NFL games, but sort of a little bit less mean and angry and violent. It's fun, but you can take your kids to it. The games are shorter. There's the pace of play is a lot faster. That you might see for that, in conjunction with other reasons people are starting to move away from football, a shift where the market is actually kind of making decisions about what people find interesting.
Well, that would be, I think it's a pretty strong prediction. I'm not saying strong or bold in the sense that it's you're wrong. I think that considering the increase of children's soccer and the fact that so many kids just play it, I think you're going to see its popularity on the rise. But also, lacrosse is going through the same kind of transformation where it is on television and it is fun to watch. It's obviously its popularity is growing here in Denver, but on the East Coast as well. And so, these are really, really good points. And I think there are a lot of factors that go into it, but perhaps we see inequality shift a bit as these kind of sports and the folks who play these sports become more accessible through the internet. But the next thing I want to talk about, we only have a couple minutes to discuss it, because I do want to get to that final topic, is the Raiders are moving to Las Vegas. And Bri, you're a Raiders guy. What was your thought when you heard the news?
I think we talked about it a little bit before the vote came down. I think we recorded the day of or the day before the vote. And I'd said for a year, like, I don't know what I'll do if they move to Vegas. I don't know if I'll have to find a new team or whatever. And then the vote came and went, and I was just sort of like, I guess they're in Vegas now. I feel bad. I mean, you texted me the next day and you're like, are you upset? And I was like, I'm not happy about it, but sort of, I guess I can deal with it. Right?
It's just, no, I mean, I think, I guess here's my interpretation of it. We're seeing the NFL owners are realizing the significance and the popularity. I shouldn't say significance, but the popularity of the NFL at this moment. I think it's a bubble. I think the bubble's going to pop. But I mean, we saw the Rams leave, we saw the Chargers leave, now we see the Raiders leave, and these owners are making business decisions in order to reap as many profits as possible. I mean, you have you have towns who want to take advantage of an NFL team to generate all of this revenue, so they're willing to front a ton of money to build
Mhm.
a stadium. But I do think that that's going to pop. I think that bubble's going to pop, and I think maybe the Raiders are the last one to leave. I mean, are there other teams out there that are having this conversation? Is the Jaguars conversation? I mean, is that a moot point anymore? They're not going to leave Florida. I,
I
I, I
don't.
haven't heard
It's,
that. I haven't heard that topic in a while.
I mean, it takes a while, right? The Raiders have had to have gone to the NFL for years. You can't just up and move, right? It takes you have to prove to the NFL that you've exhausted your efforts to stay in the city where you're staying. And here's where I'm of two minds on this, right? Like, there's one way to paint this situation to say the Raiders are a greedy organization. They make a bunch of money. They could pay for their own stadium. They could pay back their fans who have supported them in Oakland for years and years and years and years. And they could do it without breaking the bank, and invest in the community in which they live, right, in which they play. And I get all that, and I think that's not an unfair argument. Like, it is bizarre that cities are expected to pony up money, for stadiums, but the truth is that happens, right? That is kind of a negotiating tactic that teams have on their side, and oftentimes that results in a new stadium. The Raiders were pretty clear with the city, help us build a stadium or we're going to leave. The city balked at that over and over and over again. I mean, I guess that there's another way to say you kind of you stood pat. You said we're not gonna. We have other places we should spend money besides the stadium, and they left. I mean, that seems okay to me, right?
So you don't
Like,
have
have you ever been to the Coliseum, man? That
your past.
the A's
Great
still
game.
play in that thing. I mean, it's kind of cool looking on the
Mhm.
inside. It's a big circle or whatever. It's I saw the Red Sox there. It was cool. That place is the oldest, most decrepit stadium in the NFL, and I get from the Raiders' perspective that there's a lot of things that help you generate interest from players. Money is probably the first one, but the facilities that you play in, the ability for fans to come out and cheer for you, and the Oakland has not been fantastic about that in recent years. So, I mean, I would prefer if they stayed, but let me say one other thing too,
So
since we're clearly not going to get to three topics. I think there's a second story here that's really important, which is um, there's this weird thing in the United States about gambling on sports and betting on sports, and this huge taboo of having teams in Vegas. And I think the move there. I know they greenlit an NHL team in Vegas as well, but it really sort of puts a spotlight on this idea of should we be kind of hyper afraid of gambling and the risk of whatever fixing or point shaving or whatever we think is going to happen, in Vegas. And that's kind of a second conversation that we can have here. Vegas is, I think, it's not going to have a traditional fan base of a bunch of people in the city. It's a smaller market than Oakland. A bunch of people in the city who come out to games week after week after week. But I think what you will see is a different sort of fan. Different, maybe fans from different teams who are buying tickets and traveling to Vegas. It may be
yeah,
a different sort of fan culture, that means that the Raiders can sell out in Las Vegas, and
yeah.
you're pairing that with going on vacation or going out to Vegas for the
No,
weekend and staying
because
in a casino.
it'll be a destination. It'll be a destination stop.
Yeah,
I don't mean it'll be one of those itinerary items that you put on a vacation when you
yeah.
go. In the
Everyone's. I
same
mean,
way, yeah. That I
the
yeah
casinos are gonna. Don't you think they'll just buy up a lot of these tickets and comp them to big
yes, that's a great
gamblers?
idea. Yeah.
I mean, I
I
I think
think
I don't. Some people think it's going to be an issue getting people in the stadium. I don't think it will be at all. A brand new stadium, NFL games, which they've never ever had, you know, partnered with the things that make Vegas Vegas.
mhm,
I think it
mhm.
could be. I think they could make tons and tons and tons of money. It could be.
Hey, I do want to get to this last topic just because I don't want to go out of the way, but I mean, especially after the tournament, I think our shift, not just on the show, but in public discourse, will go away from college sports. But I want to make the comment on this, just real briefly. I think that the professional poker players love this shit in Vegas, right? Like this is the dudes who play professionally, not the ones that necessarily see on TV, but the guys that have, play online and everything. We had Paul Daywald on last year on the show, but I mean, this is what they're wanting. They want tourists to come in and they want them to sit at the table so they can take their money. And I think they're going to love this, right? For the same points that you just highlighted, right? You're going to have tourists coming in from all over the country, and it's going to be great for the gambling industry. But all right, to end, we got 2, 3, 4 minutes here, maybe, right? North Carolina, the state of North Carolina repealed their bathroom bill, which basically forced people to use the bathroom that they were assigned to at birth. Okay, the gender that is on their birth certificate, they have to use that bathroom. They repealed it, and a big part of that repeal, or a big force behind that repeal, was the fact that the NCAA said, you have until Thursday to repeal this thing, or we are going to pull out every event that we have scheduled and would schedule from North Carolina going up to 2020, I think, is the year. So yeah, basically the NCAA pushed some weight around, right? Shoved some weight around there and said, fix it, right? Or we are not going to host any of our events there. Of course, that does not mean school events. Does not mean that there could be no Duke basketball or North Carolina basketball. It just meant that the NCAA would not be holding any championships there, would not be holding any regional semifinals there, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think the NCAA did play a role in this. Brian, what do you think about all this?
Yeah. I mean, they were leveraging their economic power to there's a part of me that thinks the NCAA would have been cool just not scheduling stuff there. Like, maybe deep down they didn't care if North Carolina changed their policy. They were just saying, from our perspective, we're going to choose not to have events there. I do want to point at kind of a delicious irony about this. It tends to be people on the conservative side of the political spectrum who are anti gender neutral bathrooms, or allowing trans people to use bathrooms that line up with their not at birth gender identity, the gender identity they most closely identify with. But that's also the political group of people who tend to say things like the free market's a good thing, right? This is Donald Trump's argument about new healthcare and eliminating allowing cross-state competition for insurance companies and that sort of thing. This is literally the free market reacting, right? The NCAA can choose not to have events in North Carolina because they disagree politically, or because they think it will cost them money in the long term, because people will think they're supporting something political and they want to be apolitical, right? And as a result, North Carolina made a business interest to say it's more important for us to get to host NCAA events that generate money for us than it is to have a law that says people can't pee where they want to. Does that make sense? This is literally the market working. So there's kind of
the irony,
conservative contradiction here that I think is, again, delicious.
We will probably continue talking about this topic into the future as it plays out a little bit more. I mean, I know we're going to shift away from college sports, but there are some hang-ups involved, including some of the minutia that is involved with this repeal that will allow certain businesses perhaps to still be discriminatory towards folks that don't follow the that kind of uber conservative gender approach. But we're running out of time here. Brian, I want to thank you for helping me record this week. Thanks to everybody out there for listening. Remember, you can find us and rate us on iTunes and Stitcher by searching for Sports Nerds. Please do rate us when you get a chance. If you haven't already, share the podcast with your friends. Get the word out about us. You can follow us on Facebook at Sports Nerds, and on YouTube. The YouTube information is available on our Facebook page. So, Brian, thanks for joining me this week, buddy, and you have a great day.
You too.
Yo.